I'm Steve Grumbine with Real Progressives and Real Progress in Action and the host of Macro and Cheese Podcast.
And I'm Bess Goden, video lead for United Left and host of podcast Millennialsplaining. So can you tell me what is a federal jobs guarantee?
So the federal job guarantee is a federal right, a right to a job, so that no matter what, you can always have a job. You can always have a job with benefits, with a living wage, and it's intended to be a counter-cyclical job guarantee that allows for when the business cycle lays people off, instead of having a bunch of unemployed people, you have people that are able to work in their community. And it's just an incredible thing because it's federally funded and locally administered.
Awesome. If you want to know more, please join us for our panel coming up on June 5th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. We have several guests that are going to speak on this issue and how we can get it accomplished.
I know people say jobs, but it really is a job guarantee.
Right. I was corrected. I'm sorry.
No. But I'm telling you this because it's important, because the idea here is it's not just like we're just providing jobs like that. It's you're guaranteed a job. It's a right for you to have a job. And so that's why it's narrative, because it's specific to anybody will have a job. It's not like, like some basket of jobs laying over here that we'll give you. It's some of this stuff is you can actually create your own job. It's amazing.
Cool.
So,
like, I guess there are two ways we could sort of start this conversation, right? Like if we talk about the jobs guarantee and what it does, like then we could lead it into how we're going to pay for it. Or we can start with that question and then.
I think we should start with the fundamental of MMT. And the only reason why I say that is, from our perspective, the government, once it instituted a tax, created a need for a job because it created unemployment for the first time, because now you have to have a job to pay your taxes. And so by the government instituting a tax, it left us with any tax, right? You could put a tax on your house, tax on your car, tax on anything, right? And so once they instituted a tax of any variety, it made it so you had to do something to pay that tax, or you would lose your home. They would call it a hut tax. So ultimately, if you have to get a job, well, you're left to the private sector to find a job. Well, the private sector has an inherent business model that doesn't lend itself to full employment. They want to save money. So the government, by instituting a tax, should then in turn provide a solution for which to pay the tax. And that's the federal job guarantee. Instead of leaving people unemployed, we give them an opportunity to remain employed, working in their local community. And I think this is it's a democracy enhancer also, because if you think about it, if it's locally administered, a lot of people check out of local politics because there's really not a lot going on. It's a lot of, he said, she said, who's the big wig in the local town, who won prom, stuff like that. And fact of the matter is that all of a sudden, a job guarantee, that's going to make people pay attention to what's happening in their local community. They're going to want to be a part of picking what that stuff is. So I think it's a great way of enhancing democracy, bringing people back out there to participate. So it's a beautiful thing on many levels.
Excellent. So let's talk about the jobs. Because Biden has recently released a jobs plan. Have you read it or know anything about that?
The infrastructure plan and so forth.
Family, all the things in one thing. Yeah. So this is his answer to a job guarantee. But it's not a guarantee. And most importantly, it seems to be funneling money to contractors rather than employing the public directly. So can you speak a little bit about how that's different and how that affects the job market?
So yeah, sir, the jobs that are part of this program, there's nothing wrong with funding jobs of any variety. The federal government has no means to live beyond. It is the creator of the dollar. So it can fund career level, professional level opportunities from here till eternity. The job guarantee functions as a very different thing. It's a counter-cyclical, meaning as the business cycle, booms, people get hired into the private sector. As it, busts, people end up in unemployment. So we have to have an answer for how to deal with that unemployment. And when you look at the Federal Reserve has a full employment mandate, but what they do is they manage inflation by keeping a certain percentage of people unemployed intentionally. And this right here is very, very immoral, very, very cruel, and very unnecessary. The federal job guarantee gives you a living wage, gives you benefits, and it allows you to work in your local community. But more importantly, though, it's a right to a job. It's a right to a job. So, it's voluntary. So hypothetically, let's say you want to work 9 months of the year, and you take your job guarantee for 9 months. You can take 3 months off in the summer and go backpacking or do whatever you want, because you're given a living wage during that job. So it's a democracy enhancer. It's freedom. It's all sorts of things, and it's not working for the man. So I think that the beauty of the job guarantee is that it redefines what work is. A lot of things that we currently don't feel are profitable, it allows us to provide that wage floor, that base, for unskilled labor, so that, you're ending generational poverty. You don't require some degree to get in here. Ultimately, you're given a living wage, a living wage. I mean, that's a huge deal. And the other thing is, that's truly an amazing thing. If I work 40 hours a week at a job guarantee job at a living wage with benefits, Walmart can't poach me and subsidize bad wages with a UBI. They have to meet or beat the job guarantee wage to hire me out of the job guarantee. So this automatically becomes the de facto minimum wage. And if it's set at a living wage instead of just a minimum wage, you can truly change and transform society through the use of a federal job guarantee. It is policy, so that means that people are going to negotiate it, and most likely, unfortunately, people that don't understand the concept of the job guarantee will put their fingerprints on it, which we have to guard against. It's important to keep the people that don't understand this at a minimum, because their influence could really harm the value and the efficacy of a job guarantee. So it's up to us to educate them. And Biden's program is not a job guarantee. It's great to provide private sector jobs. It's great to provide career level jobs, blue collar jobs for people. The federal job guarantee is the base wage. It is a local job that you can do in your community. You can work in a nonprofit. There's any number of things, and it's guaranteed. So that's the difference. That's what's beautiful about it.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit more about how we're going to pay for it, that question, and why with MMT that question is not as constraining of a concern as people think it is. Because I was listening to a Lib podcast the other day, and when they were talking about this bill, they were saying, well, it's just a lot of money. It's just a lot. It's a $4 trillion.
Really big numbers.
And but they didn't say it's a lot in comparison to like the total federal budget, or, I mean, what is, it's a lot compared to what you make, what we make, what I make, but is it, when we're talking about numbers that big, we need to think about, proportions. We don't need to think about the number itself. Especially when we're a fiat currency and we make our own money. And the only thing really, from a layman's perspective, me coming at MMT, it seems like the major restriction is inflation. And it sounded to me like we have a lot of room to play with the economy before inflation becomes an inhibitive factor.
At the top about how to pay for it. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
So, ultimately, the federal government is the currency issuer, as you said in your comments to me. And, the federal government has supreme power over the dollar, because the dollar is nothing but a unit of account, like an inch or a pound. And you can't run out of inches or pounds, right?
Right.
So the idea of running out of dollars is just as ridiculous, because it's just a way of measuring a person's, income. So the federal government wrote all the laws and spoke into existence the dollar. The dollar is the nation's unit of account. So it has the ability to pay for anything that we need, period. Financial constraints are never a real issue. Everything is paid for with keystrokes, and it's not our tax dollars, which is very hard for people to understand at times, that federal taxes literally do not pay for spending. Federal taxes are meant as a kind of a driver, the obligation to pay tax is what creates the need for the currency. So by instituting a job guarantee, it
Can you
gives
explain that
people, what's
more?
that?
Can you
Sure.
explain that? Since that's fucked up to hear, because
So
that's
if you think about this, if you go back to the day of kings, all right,
okay.
the monarch would say, hey, I want to build an aqueduct, I want to build a castle, I want to build a roadway, I want to have a standing army, whatever. And he'd go to the villagers and say, hey, will you build this aqueduct for me? And they'd say, yeah, I'm thinking I'm pretty good. I'm eating my potatoes in my field, I'm fishing, I'm playing with the kids, I'm tending to my flock, whatever. And the king goes, yeah, you know what? Good point. You're right. He goes, how about if I give you these gold coins? And the guy's like, gold coin, what am I going to do with that? Can't eat it, can't do anything with it. Hard pass, right? He goes, yeah, I can see your point. He goes, how about if I make a tax payable only in this gold coin on your house? And if you don't pay that tax with that gold coin, you're going to lose your house. Oh, wait a minute, hold on. How do I get that gold coin? Funny you should ask. I have this aqueduct I'd like to build. I have the standing army. I have this roadway I'd like to build. And so that is really, in essence, what tax-driven money is. It's state currency, right? And so Friedrich Knapp wrote this stuff about the state theory of money. And, ultimately, the state is the creator of the money. It is the creator of it. And so when you think about Congress, Article 1, Section 8 of the US Constitution has been given the power of the purse. And so all spending decisions are made by Congress, and Congress will write a law, write a bill. They will pass those laws over to the Federal Reserve, who will then in turn debit the Treasury's accounts with whatever money it needs, and it will spend that money into existence. There is no cash reserves balled up in some fat stacks like Breaking Bad in some warehouse somewhere. The money is literally keystroked into existence. So that's how the federal government spends, and it can afford a job guarantee. It can afford Medicare for all, it can afford everything. It can afford a Green New Deal yesterday. So the job guarantee is just a natural conclusion to the state's imposition of the tax. The tax is there for the state to provision itself so it can get the things it needs, so it can build airports and roads and so forth. But without having the tax, it has no coercive value to be able to get us to do whatever it is that we want to do. So we oftentimes will hear people talk about taxpayer dollars and my hard-earned tax dollars. And well, I hate to break it to you, but your taxes are deleted, literally deleted. They don't get recycled. The government spends a dollar into existence one time, and it doesn't see that dollar again until it's deleted when it's received as a tax. So the government never re-spends money. In a fiat environment, it's just coupons, right? You don't reuse coupons. Coupons are destroyed after you use them. And that's really all a dollar is a tax credit. So, ultimately, it's the imposition of the tax that makes us need that dollar. And so that is how the economy works. That's the plumbing. That's what keeps it moving. And if the dollar is moving too fast, they might raise taxes. If the dollar is moving too slow, they may reduce taxes. It's kind of a brake and a gas pedal for the economy.
Inflation?
So
Moving.
inflation's a very interesting thing.
Before we get into that, I just want to clarify what you meant by moving.
So the gears of the plumbing of the economy, right? If money stops moving, if everybody becomes savers, then we're going to go into a great recession. Okay,
Gotcha.
if we're spending money, that means that one person's spending is another person's income.
Okay.
And so if you keep the economy going that way, then, well, we're going to have a booming economy. If you don't, then we're going to have a recession or worse, possibly a depression.
Yeah.
So that's where that comes in.
Oh, Spend your money.
Well, there are certain ways we can do this, and and everybody has a natural inclination for savings. Everybody would like to have some money saved for a rainy day.
Sure.
Most people, however, don't have any money saved for a rainy day because our government has literally starved us of any kind of services, meaningful spending on us. I mean, you saw during the pandemic how they literally barely gave us anything. I mean, $2,000 checks turned into $1,400 checks, and we've been literally dealing with austerity and very, very small-minded ideas coming out of our government, out of a fake fear of inflation, which I think is where you were going next. I think it's important to talk about inflation. We saw
Yeah.
during the pandemic that ultimately supply chains broke. You have a iPhone manufactured in what, like 47 nations, and semiconductors were on back order and so forth. So ultimately, when there's a scarcity of products and services, you're going to have competition for those products and services. Think about the run on toilet paper. Think about when the fear of the gas shortage because of that hack that happened in the Colonial Pipeline here recently. Whenever there's a scarcity of something, there's a run on it, and that can drive prices up. And so inflation is typically a result of not too much money in the economy, folks. Let's just be clear. It requires spending. So once people spend that money, that creates flows. Stocks are just holding on to money, flows are spending money. So flows can create inflation, especially if there is a scarcity of the real resources people are striving to receive. So that's it in a nutshell. Ultimately, the federal government, for a job guarantee in particular, would be the one that would spend that money into existence to the states, to the local communities as direct payments to the individuals that are working in that job guarantee job. And quite frankly, the job guarantee jobs are not make work. They're not welfare, workfare, whatever. They're literally jobs that people want to do. They're serving their local community. And so the opportunity for communities to decide what their values are and what they think is good for their community. Think about how many things are left undone in the community because they're not deemed as profitable for somebody. So the opportunity for volunteer work that had previously been uncompensated could now be compensated at a living wage. And that's a really impressive change.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that, so certain things, like childcare perhaps would be subsidized.
Artists.
Even possibly cover like subsidizing care in your own home.
Absolutely. Elder care, care work, all kinds. It's about socially valuable work, not profitable work necessarily.
Wow.
So there's an incredible range. I mean, we're limited only by what our imagination can come up with. In fact, last night I interviewed Bill Mitchell, who's one of the original developers of the modern monetary theory school of thought. And he talked about surfers, paying surfers under the job guarantee. And he says, surfing is what they like doing, but what if, as part of their job guarantee service, they went to schools and taught water safety, because there's more deaths from drownings in the eastern side of Australia, for example. And he's like, why not? Why not do that? Why not provide that? You could get people that are surfers to take water samples for the local science, whatever. I mean, we can do all kinds of things. And it's only up to us, the limits of which we can dream a better dream and provide a better society for all. So think about this. If you've been denied employment, now all of a sudden you won't be denied employment. Think about the generational poverty from people that have been living in squalor for generations. All of a sudden now you end generational poverty. Think about a woman who's been beaten by her husband for years, but has been afraid to leave because of the money, and she hasn't worked and she's afraid she won't get a job. Now, if she can get out of that unsafe environment, she can leave Michigan and go to Colorado, get good weed and drink clean water. I mean, this is a great opportunity for people to have mobility as well. It's a great democracy enhancer. It's a great equalizer. And it's the beginning of a public citizens union, if you will, of people who can walk away from a bad job and say, you know what, I'm going to go work this job guarantee job until I can find one where a boss will treat me better.
Yeah.
Boom, changer, life changing.
I mean, it would have changed my life. I had I was on track to get my master's, and I wanted to join the publishing industry, even though it's sort of dying with everything else. And that's not the millennials' fault, by the way, because every article blames us for killing something in the economy. But you know, if we had money to
Well,
spend,
strapped with, you got all that debt on your back from student loans, and before you ever have your first kiss, you're carrying $100,000 into the world. So it's crazy. I mean, I don't know how they expect.
To be honest, not to go off on a thing, but it's not just student loans. Like, the cost of living is so epic. I read an article, I think in 2015, 2016, about somebody who worked for what was that? Yelp. Somebody worked for Yelp, okay? And they did one of the basic, jobs, but it wasn't enough to pay her $1,400 a month rent, because that's what it was in Brooklyn at the time. And she, essentially starved, had no furniture, and had to steal food from her workplace to survive. And that's not uncommon in my generation. And the fact that wages have stagnated for so long,
Oh yes.
But everything else has been, all the cost of living, the cost of transportation, everything has just risen so quickly. It almost feels like we can't communicate our situation to other generations, because other generations had a chance to build a little wealth before that happened. They also had a better chance at the jobs that were left because they had the resumes for it. Whereas we were coming just out of college and we had, internships. But as everybody knows, an internship is just a way to get free labor.
Yep.
And it doesn't mean crap. And there are studies proving that, because unpaid internships are equally as likely to yield a job as no internships at all. That was a study that was done. And some colleges require them to graduate. Anyway, so that's a sidetrack. But so I think that, when we talk about the burdens of young people, that we shouldn't just automatically go to student debt, because yes, student debt is the easiest thing to fix. But I don't know if I should admit this, but I've been ducking my student loan like pretty much always, because I don't have the money. I don't have the money to pay all of my bills all the time.
Right.
So I can't possibly pay other debts. I have credit card debts. I have, medical debts. Can't pay those either.
Right.
But that's,
if you think about this, if we gave millennials a federal job guarantee, right, to offset, like, what if you were going to college and you could have a federal job guarantee while you were in school, even like where you're doing something to serve the college campus or something like that, or the people, the kids, whatever. But ultimately, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, like, let me go back to what I was saying before, that it would have changed my life. When I went to get my master's, my grandpa got sick. My parents had already passed away. I had already caretaken for them after my BA. And I was trying to get back on my own feet and do what society told you to do, was to get, a real job. Like my BA was in theater. Everyone was telling me like how stupid you were for doing that, and you couldn't possibly be qualified for any job ever if your master's was, or your BA was theater, which is stupid. I have so many personal skills, like customer service, anything. Give me a break. So obviously, don't you want to talk to me? But anyway, so so when I went to my master's program, by the way, my master's program was deemed by Forbes magazine the year that I went there as the least profitable master's to get of all the masters in the entire world. So that was cool. I went to be a children's librarian. I went to be a children's librarian at a design school. So I sort of did a little of both. And I went broke because I had to take care of my grandpa. So everything that they expected me to do, internships, all of the, I had a paid internship and an unpaid internship pretty much the whole time I was there. And I had to do those during the week. That took up all my time plus classes. And during the weekend, I had to go home to take care of my grandpa. I was trying at the time to find him an assisted living facility. That's a whole other story that we could go into, but we won't, about how impossible that situation is. And he fought me on it. And at the end of the day, you know, going back and forth from New York to New Jersey, I lived in Brooklyn. I ran out of money. I just ran out of money, and I didn't make enough to even pay my rent at that point. So I had to abandon all of my career ideas and move back to New Jersey to take care of my grandpa. And I lived on his couch, and I took care of him for 2 years until he finally got, you know, his health was poor enough to get professional help. And I then from his couch, went into a situation with a boyfriend who, you know, started out well and then ended up not so great. He, you know, became verbally abusive, and I wanted to leave that situation. I remember the day that I wanted to leave that situation in June. And I finally, because I busted my ass and I got like 3 different jobs at the same time. And I finally got enough money to rent a room in somebody's house. And it took me from June to December of that year to move out, after I had already decided to break up with him. And I had to sleep in the same bed with him because we were in his parents' house. It wasn't an apartment.
Oh my.
It would have changed my life if I had an option like that. It would have changed my life. Yeah.
Right
And another fun story is that during that time period, right before I went broke and went back to my grandpa's, I started selling crochet jewelry on the street corner in New York to make food money. And one day I was arrested for it because you can't do that without a license, apparently. And that prevented me from getting a real job, or literally almost any job, for a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It took a year to be expunged from my record. And thankfully now it is expunged and I can get a job and everything's okay with that. But yeah, I mean, but notably, I have been looking into the different, Ayanna Pressley has a bill for the federal job guarantee. And it does specifically say that if you have a criminal history, you will still be guaranteed a job. And I think that is so important. I was also curious to know about drug testing, because a lot of people need to smoke marijuana for their health. And a lot of people either don't live in a state that has medical marijuana or legal marijuana, or does live in a state that has those things, but cannot afford to go through legal means to obtain that marijuana. I live in New Jersey. We had medical marijuana. It's finally legal here now. Well, we had medical marijuana for maybe about 5 years when I could have really used it. And I could not afford the doctor's fees. I could not afford the fees that I would have to pay to literally just get a registration card. On top of which you have to pay the same price as you would on the street for the marijuana itself. So I didn't have that money, and I couldn't get the medicine I needed. So anyway, a federal job would help.
I think it should not be there, though. I think there should be no drug testing whatsoever. But
Yes.
that brings up another very important point, right? The states are making decisions to legalize at a state level. It's
Yes.
still considered a controlled substance at the federal level, which is a crime in and of itself that it should be that way.
Right.
Because if you understand the history of marijuana laws, you know it has absolutely nothing to do with preventing us from dying or doing some horrible thing. It's all about DuPont's desire to keep their business going without having hemp competing with it, which is not marijuana, by the way, but hemp was in direct contrast to nylon and so forth. And then the flip side of that is it was always used as a cudgel against Hispanics and other minorities. You
Black.
can look at some of the old writings and old court, congressional testimony where they literally talk about how marijuana made the white girls dance with the black man and stuff like that. They were scared to death of losing their way. It's hilarious. It is so hilarious. But it's the joke is old now, right? It's cost enough people their lives, and the bigotry and racism baked into it. I mean, we
Yeah.
should all be ashamed. I mean, like ashamed that we allow marijuana to be illegal at this point.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think though that when we talk about this issue, that we should also talk about the medical industry and big pharma, because they, I believe, are the secret behind why it hasn't been, I mean, who are we fighting, right, to get it legalized? We're not fighting like people who just don't like pot, like old guys who are just like, oh, it's wrong. We're fighting somebody with money and a reason to fight, right? And we're fighting, I think, the pharma industry, because they make a lot of money off of different pills for different reasons that pot could solve all of.
Well, follow the money, because you got one part of it right. The big pharma industry definitely has a desire to keep it illegal because, I mean, you can grow it in your backyard.
Yeah.
But there's many, many more people that have a desire and interest in this, and starting with the private prison industry,
Mm-hmm.
the
You're
drug
right.
testing industry, the surveillance industry, the policing industry. All these different groups have a desire, and let's just be fair, class-based struggle. They know that if they can keep it illegal, they can eliminate ne'er-do-goods, people they don't want working for them, people they don't want to be around. They can keep
Right.
them out of the way, and it's an excuse, quite frankly, to continue to jail people. So there's the medical issues with the big pharma. There's the
Mm-hmm.
financial issues with the marketing. There
Mm-hmm.
is all the businesses that have been set up. How much GDP is based on jailing people for marijuana. It is unbelievable. It's a huge booming business to
Yeah.
keep people in jail. So never mistake it. But then let's take another look at the state level there. If you look at the way charters are given for people to sell marijuana, this is going to wealthy, rich dudes, again, white people typically as well. And
Mm-hmm.
Michelle Alexander, in her book, The New Jim Crow, talks about the history leading up to this. And in recent interviews that she's done and talks she's given, she talks about how absolutely insane it is that we would legalize marijuana and once again preclude the people that have been jailed for it all these years from being the ones to receive the benefits of
Yeah.
this. In fact, they're being locked out of the business. They can't make a profit.
Right.
So I think it's once again, you have to know the history of the U.S. Howard Zinn's a great place to start to get this history. This is more par for the course of keeping people that they don't want in their neighborhoods and so forth out of their neighborhoods. It's a moving target, but if you watch the way they do it, it's always something, whether it's vagrancy laws or I mean, end slavery and you turn into a slave of the state, a prison slave. I mean, so there's so many, it's such a deep rabbit hole to go down to the way that the lack of justice has been profitable for people that you and I wouldn't piss on their head to put out a fire.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Okay. Well, is there anything else that you think we should cover?
Well, yes, as a matter of fact, I do. So one of the most important things for us as progressives, as leftists, trying to advance a leftist agenda, whether it be socialism or anything else, really comes down to understanding what we can do today. So, without having a bloody revolution, and all we have to do is look at how we caved in when Bernie didn't get it, and all we have to do is look at various times where we just went back to sleep. The temperature in this country, as much as I would love it to be red hot for revolution, is not red hot for revolution. In fact, it's hard to keep activist heads in the game right now, even.
Yeah.
So it's important to understand that MMT allows us the knowledge, the weaponized knowledge, to advance every single thing we fell in love with Bernie Sanders' platform, Jill Stein's platform, any of the other leftist ideas. We can fund every single thing that we want today. And I mean, just look how easily Biden was able to sell, give Israel, support for weapons. It was a blink of an eye, no big deal. And then you look back at how much he boosted the military industrial complex budget this year, more than Donald Trump even. So if that's the case, and taxes didn't get raised, in fact, many people were unemployed even. Where did that money come from? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. And so it's very important that progressives and leftists stop allowing the right-wing think tank of inflation and hyperinflation. They're just printing money, all that ridiculous nonsense. It's time right here, right now, for leftists and progressives to get the crap out of their mouths and start paying attention to MMT so that we can win this battle. We are up against incredible odds. They're very well financed, very well organized, and their job is just to block us. That's their job. That's what they do. So if we're going to be effective in this space, we can no longer skip the posts about how you're going to pay for it. And if you look on Twitter, Twitter is full of progressives and leftists that will talk about nonstop about electoral politics. But the minute you try and break in and explain to them how the system works, they go silent. Crickets. And it's a shame. It's a bloody shame. I'm not sure whether it's because they don't want to embarrass themselves because they don't understand, whether they're bored, whatever it is. They got to stop being bored, and they got to stop being afraid to learn, and they got to embrace this, or there will be no Green New Deal. And that's a huge deal for us if we want to live on this planet.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's it in a nutshell for me. I mean, there's a lot more we could talk about, but I think I can't wait to do this job guarantee panel. I'm looking very forward to working with you all in the future. Real Progressives, Real Progress in Action, United Left. We have a great thing going, and I'm really excited to be a part of it.
Me too. Me too. I'm really excited to bring people together, and I'm really excited to talk about it in a way that we can hopefully implement and make it happen.
Absolutely.
So, thank you so much for talking with me today, Steve. It was great.
Not a problem. Anytime. I look forward to doing it again in the future.
Great. Me too. Absolutely.